It's not just about MAHA, it's about consumerization, patient empowerment, the role of technology, and the convergence of these cross currents altogether. The risk is that, at least for the life sciences industry, that the technology industry or the wellness industry will take advantage of and innovate and disrupt in ways that we've held back from doing in our industry by not thinking from the perspective of what people are looking for and not adapting to the empowerment that people have about their health.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're joined by an extraordinary leader who is helping the life sciences industry confront one of the most important and misunderstood shifts in healthcare today. Noël Theodosiou, CEO of Luminous, brings us a rare combination of strategic insight, patient empathy, and market awareness. As the Make America Healthy Again movement reshapes patient expectations, many life science companies have dismissed it as a fad. Noël argues that ignoring it is not only misguided, but risky. Through her work helping companies deeply understand patient motivations and perceptions, Noël has identified critical gaps MAHA is exposing. Gaps in trust, communication, prevention, and partnership. Today, she'll break down how life sciences organizations can lead with clarity, credibility, and patient-centered purpose in a rapidly changing health landscape. Hey, Noël, are you ready to be our guru today?
I'm channeling my inner guru, yes.
Oh, I love it. We're very excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
I would say probably the most distinctive thing relative to this topic is that I come from a family of scientists and physicians, but I got my degree in music. So I'm a little bit of a black sheep in my family. And the fact that I ended up focusing on this industry is a coming home of sorts. But I obviously bring a sort of non-establishment lens. I'm not a scientist. I just have a deep, deep, deep respect for science and medicine from growing up with physicians and scientists all over the family.
Well, that's really fascinating. I would argue the music is not only creative, but there's the scientific and mathematical element to it, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Another podcast, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, Noël, you discussed, the Make America Healthy Again movement has been dismissed by many leaders as a fad. And if I've got this right, you've indicated that that's a mistake. And what MAHA really is signaling is more about patient expectations and a broader healthcare ecosystem. Can you help us understand that a little better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to, first of all, conflate MAHA with MAGA. And obviously they tap into, from a political perspective, they're united. They tap into similar currents of dissatisfaction with how things are going. But we see MAHA as a sort of broader signifier of frustration with the healthcare system that's been building for some number of years. And really, it's people's sense that the health system isn't really serving our needs and it's failing us. I don't think there are many people who haven't had a bad experience. As I said, I come from a family of physicians and I feel very well supported, but I've had my fights with the insurance company. I've had my doctor's appointments that are underwhelming. And also there's been this shift that I think everybody recognizes that health has become a little bit more business oriented and less care oriented. So people refer to that as sort of the health business rather than the health care. And I think that's why the wellness industry has grown so much. These alternative solutions that are much more relatable, they're motivating, they speak to people what people really want from their health and what they want to thrive and live their lives. That discourse and that world really resonates a lot. Obviously, there are aspects of MAHA that are concerning to people who come from the biomedical community, and the wellness industry operates to a totally different set of rules, that's for sure. But I guess the message to the industry is let's open our eyes to that reality and lean into the things that can address some of the failures of the system itself. And there is a role for the industry to play, and that's sort of what we're focused on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it kind of leads into my next question because through Luminous, you help life science companies understand patients at a deeper, often emotional level. So, from your perspective, what trust gaps are you seeing today, and how is MAHA tapping into those in ways the industry hasn't addressed?
There are many trust gaps. I think we'll pick off sort of the main one that, at least at Luminous, and we'll maybe address others as we go in the conversation. But the main one we address at Luminous and our mission is addressing the gap between lab and real world. So a surprisingly large number of therapies, products, devices underperform in the real world because they don't anticipate the totality of real world experience. People are complex. One of the most unpredictable things in the world is human behavior, and how a product will play out and be adopted when it's in the market is often doesn't meet our expectations. And that's because in reality, about 80% of health outcomes are attributable to factors other than clinical care. So innovations that are developed really by the industry are about less than 20%, because 20% encompasses clinical care, the physician, the health system, access, et cetera. And I can give some examples of that from the hot GLP-1 space that we're seeing now play out. It is extremely complex. And obviously, GLP-1s are an incredible innovation. But there have been a lot of social, cultural, and environmental factors that have played a role in its uptake, driving its uptake, and also making it a little bit chaotic. And it starts with the assumption that people want to lose weight and they'll do anything to lose weight. Now, of course, the recognition that to keep your weight off, you have to stay on a GLP-1 for your whole life. And that's not necessarily something people want. And what I think is really interesting right now is the focus of investors and developers on products in the pipeline now that are really emphasizing magnitude of weight loss, trying to get higher percentages of total body weight loss, and under the assumption that the more weight you lose, the better, and that we can achieve this scientifically. But we're seeing in consumer behavior is that people want to control how much and when they lose weight. So there are a lot of possibilities there. And so just stepping back and saying, okay, the GLP-1s, while an incredible scientific innovation, they have a ways to go in terms of truly addressing needs and understanding what we were talking about before, this sort of misalignment between what we expect from the healthcare system and what we get, sort of adding up to a perception that the industry is really not in sync with what people are looking for. So we focus on taking the consumer perspective, taking the human perspective, and challenging companies to think biologically, psychologically, and sociologically, like holistically, about their healthcare solutions.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and we'll get into that in a moment. But you said something I wanted to kind of peel into for just a second here. You were talking about the lab versus the real world experience, right? And I'm wondering, I may put you on the spot with this, but I'm interested in your thought about some of those real world evidence, real world studies are very expensive to conduct, and not only that, but time consuming. Do you think some of it might be that, a lot of the innovative companies are maybe a little bit underfunded, or they're trying to get things to market? Do you have any thoughts with that?
I mean, obviously those studies are extremely expensive. They're also extremely important. I would say what we emphasize in our work is a couple of things. One is just thinking more broadly. The biopsychosocial model is established in clinical medicine, but it is not fundamentally used as a tool in clinical development and product development. So we tend to focus on mechanisms of action, the assets, the molecule, the biochemistry, and isolation. So to me, that's a lens, a lens to expand. The second thing would be bringing the patient voice and the lived experience in, which is something companies talk about a lot, but we really don't, as an industry, fully have the capability of co-creation with patients. So I guess what I'm saying is you don't need to do an extremely expensive real world study, while we would advocate for that, you don't have to do that to expand your lens. And there's a lot to be learned from other industries about how to do some of these things.
Yeah, that's helpful. And to build on that, you've mentioned that the industry has a traditional, like, paternalistic tone. So what does a true partnership with patients look like, and how can companies start to shift towards that model? Do you have any thoughts for us there?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on research and studies and things. I mean, one of the things that I noticed, so I'm a career consultant and I started my career in beer and consumer goods, and then slowly moved into more sophisticated regulated areas before I specialized in the life sciences. And I do feel as if other industries are much better in terms of their co-creation processes and the way that they use market research in both product development and in commercialization, and the research that you traditionally do in commercialization. And the industry, the life sciences, tends to exacerbate the trust gap by sort of coming forward with, oh, this is how we're going to run the clinical trial. We want to be sure that you're going to show up at all the follow-up appointments. So what do we need to do to help you do that? Rather than necessarily taking an approach of, what is the kind of clinical trial that we can run, that we can develop together, that will address all of the factors that go into your lived experience of dealing with the condition, and address the needs we have to understand how this product will work for you. So there's just a slight difference in those approaches around taking a perspective of, we have an idea. What do you think? How are you going to deal with this idea? How can we improve it? Versus taking a sort of co-creation perspective. And I think the we know best thing speaks a little also to this perspective that there's a lot of science here that we can't possibly explain to everybody, and not everybody can understand. And while I think to some extent, we can't expect everybody to become biochemists of their health and their conditions, I do think that's out of sync with contemporary expectations. And I think people expect more and they're prepared for more. And we see that evidenced in Dr. Google and all sorts of other things people are using. So people have agency and they want to use it. And I think we have to better adapt to that through our research and the ways we engage.
Yeah, and it sounds like perhaps just taking a few moments to explain what might happen and what the outcome might be, right? It could be very helpful here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We've done quite a bit of work around talking to patients about enrolling in clinical trials. And sometimes they say they get presented with a clinical trial, but they don't understand that in the context of their other options. So there are all sorts of ways to make those processes and the engagement more human-centered, and taking the consumer or the patient or the lived experience perspective.
Yeah, that's helpful. And you've also noted, and I was intrigued by this, that life science companies often unintentionally blend scientific education with product promotion, right? And I thought about my career, and I'm thinking, was I ever guilty of that? And maybe, right? But according to what I've read, is that might create some additional risk. So maybe you can help us out in terms of why this is happening, and how can our leaders fix this?
So we were just talking about, the science and how much people expect from it. Obviously, we're also dealing with, as I think we've often found that conflicting things happen at the same time. So I just saw some headline yesterday that the pharmaceutical industry has spent more this year than any other year on advertising, something like 7 billion. At the same time, we have a thread of MAHA and in general in our culture of challenging science and scientific authority and expertise. I mean, to me, that means we have even greater responsibility to be good stewards of science. And one of the things when we were talking about the paternalistic or the we know best attitude of the industry, I think oftentimes we invoke science as a sort of, believe us, there's science here. But as the world gets more sophisticated about how it thinks about healthcare, I think we're kind of underserving that, and with the pressures of movements or dimensions of movements like MAHA challenging scientific expertise, we can't back away. We actually have to lean into that. Mm-hmm. That means getting more nuanced in the way that we communicate, drawing real clear signals between scientific data that supports your product or your innovation versus educational content and biomedical scientific expertise that really explains a condition. So when we talk about it's the science or science is important, we're protecting something, it's a lot of things there. And so helping people navigate and understand this is the science that explains the condition. And here's the scientific data that supports, our FDA approved innovation. And there, that distinction between promotion and education is very important to be more transparent and to, again, meet people where they are in terms of their expectations.
Yeah. And that also then leads me to prevention, right? Because you've discussed that life sciences companies should play a bigger role in prevention of the situations in illness and not just treatment. So what are you thinking? What would this look like at the product marketing and patient engagement levels?
So I guess I think I'm not inconsistent with people in the industry when I say I think of this industry as having a very unique social contract. Mm-hmm. We invest a lot and invest a lot in scientific and biomedical research and develop innovative solutions that, address real needs of people who are ill and trying to live and thrive. But I don't think we always take a leadership role in addressing the condition as holistically as we could. Okay, so we talked already about taking lived experience and bringing it into development and commercialization more and expanding our lens. And we talked about the 80-20, right? We're really focusing on just a small portion of the solution. And because of our unique social contract, there are a lot of expectations that we're seeing. Also, if I can invoke the GLP-1 example again here, we see this discourse around, big corporate, big pharma creating a problem that they have a solution for, or big food and big pharma in cahoots. We're creating obesity and we're solving obesity. The truth is, of course, the science does tell us our understanding of the condition and our understanding of our environment that the obesity is affected by many, many factors, of course, including food and what we intake, our activity, environmental factors, lifestyle factors, genetic factors. So there's more at play. Mm-hmm. So I think prevention is an opportunity in the sense of really taking responsibility for our social contract, recognizing that our products are a small portion of the solution, but they have to be accompanied always by other things and playing a role in that. Now, in some cases, we could be bold and we could advocate for a sugar tax, or we could go head to head against big food. And I can imagine, people in the industry would say, well, that's a little bit much. But I mean, even in small ways, as we were talking about taking responsibility for aspects of education and being responsible in the way we educate and distinguish between promotional scientific data or scientific data that's packaged for promotion and otherwise, but also like building our brands in a way that are more broadly aligned with some of the aspirations of people in their health, being more advocating for more policy change and taking a broader public health stance, which is going to be so important as this environment evolves and we see sort of public health and a leadership gap in that space. The industry has enormous amounts of expertise to play a role here. And it certainly supports its overall mission. And I hope that's the sort of a motivating message for the industry.
Yeah, and I can see where if some of the companies were to start to do some of this, provide that kind of preventative education, then when you do need them, right, you've kind of had that trust and awareness that, hey, this company's out there. Is that kind of the path you're heading down?
For sure. I mean, I think the other piece of data I saw recently was that the only industry or the only sector that was had a worse reputation than pharmaceutical and med device is the government, the federal government. So absolutely, and it's part of the trust gap that you highlighted in the beginning. It contributes to that. I guess it's just a question of course, there's always a conflict in industry, right, between profit and social contract. And I do think there's a lot to be navigated there. And I know individuals in the industry and leaders in the industry who are in this industry because they believe in that social contract. So it's kind of having the ability to have the courage of our convictions. And I don't think we're sacrificing profit to do good. I think we're just looking at the picture as a whole and taking responsibility for the expertise that we bring to the world.
Yeah, yeah. And usually when there's a lot to be navigated, that spells opportunity as well, correct?
Usually, yes.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah, for sure. And, at the top of our discussion, you mentioned that some of the MAHA followers are turning away from traditional healthcare channels, looking at holistic medicine and other sorts of activities. So, what does your patient insight uh, really reveal about their motivations? And how should innovators respond to all of this?
It's interesting because we talked already about not conflating MAHA with MAGA.
Hmm.
Of course, our reflex reaction is to do so. Our reflex reaction is to sort of be concerned about the challenge to science. And obviously, earlier I was talking about standing up for that. But MAHA's momentum and its roots in dissatisfaction with the healthcare system also has a lot in it. It's what we've been referring to kind of as a big tent of different segments of people. And yes, there's a lot of skepticism of authority and expertise. And there, we talked already about being good stewards around scientific knowledge and expertise. But I think the industry has to walk and chew gum at the same time, evolving the approach to advocate and to innovate and co-create and address more aspirational ideas around our health and kind of speak more of the language of the wellness industry and address those things and incorporate ideas about health and longevity and wellness and living a full life, and balancing that with our biomedical expertise. Taking a more holistic view, incorporating biopsychosocial factors is a big part of that, and not just being focused on addressing illness.
Hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. And, with this, right, the companies, innovators, and obviously the investors that work with them are always interested in mitigating risk, right? So I'm wondering if you can just share with us your thoughts about what are some of the strategic risks for companies that continue to dismiss this MAHA movement, and where could this leave them in the future, 5, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's as not a scientist, I'm going to not go deep into this, but there's obviously this concern about scientific established science and standing up for that. So obviously, there's a risk there. But I think from a business point of view, and you're asking this kind of from a more business point of view, there's really this risk and increasing risk that the industry becomes more and more out of touch with contemporary needs and aspirations, which is kind of what I've been referring to in this discussion. And there are other industries that can come and fill in the void. It's not just about MAHA, it's about consumerization. It is about patient empowerment. It's about the role of technology and the convergence of these cross currents altogether. I was at a conference in London and we was on a panel talking about personalized nutrition. And it was really interesting to speak with a technologist, an investor, a genomics expert, a chef, and someone of an industry leader from the food industry about the convergence of technology, food, and health. And that the risk is that, at least for the life sciences industry, that the technology industry or the wellness industry will take advantage of and innovate and disrupt in ways that we've held back from doing in our industry by not thinking from the perspective of what people are looking for and not adapting to the empowerment that people have about their health. And I'll just throw in AI here too. Of course, AI is making that more complex. We already hear a lot from physicians about Dr. Google. There's now Dr. AI as well, adding complexity there. So people are taking in control. And I have heard people say, well, it's not true in cancer. It's not true in rare disease. It's true in everything to different degrees, that relationship and that sense of empowerment. But I think the risk is that the industry will become increasingly out of touch and will be sort of sidelined to sort of mechanistic health technical solutions.
Well, so with that, I'm wondering, as a CEO advising companies on patient understanding and market alignment, what leadership lessons have you found most valuable in this movement of rapid change? Do you have any insights for us here?
I mean, I will sing the song I feel like I'm singing all the time, which is we've got to challenge what has become an established industry playbook. We have certain ways of working, and those need to adapt in ways that really take into consideration contemporary concerns. A key component to that is widening our lens. So we just talked about the convergence of technology, consumer goods, and health. That convergence is simply going to change the way people think and act. It's already changing the way people think and act about their health. There are alternatives. People are circumnavigating the system. We keep invoking GLP-1s as an example, but that's a great one. The desire for direct access to GLP-1 and not to go through your own physician. So I think we have to work hard to learn and open our eyes and be courageous to learn from other categories. Yes, we operate in a regulated industry, but innovation comes from sort of putting your head above the parapet and looking more widely. I also feel that if you're a founder, if you're an innovator in an early stage company, you have an opportunity building from scratch to engage patients and lived experience experts in your business from the very beginning, in your science from the very beginning. Again, referring to other industries and technology, they're very used to iterating with user experience throughout their development process. So that needs to happen in the life sciences too. If I were a founder or an innovator in an early stage company, I would be making that part of my philosophy and my way of working to collaborate. But I would say widening our lens, engaging more stakeholders rather than the usual ones, challenging the playbook and the way we usually do things is sort of where the leadership opportunity is in any shifting landscape.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we often talk about on this podcast about the clinical immersion, right? About, getting into the clinical setting, working with those providers, et cetera. And I think what you're suggesting is also finding those patients that they serve and doing some follow-up with those patients to get their experience to help. And I suspect you're thinking, or maybe you've seen some result about that really helping the innovative process.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we see lived experience experts and patient advisors and patient advisory boards and efforts to patient engagement functions and advocacy efforts in organizations really pushing the envelope. I feel as if the industry still looks at patient engagement as either a box to tick or as something that slows them down or adds more money. to the process, makes the process more expensive. But there is data starting to come out that when you engage patients and caregivers early in clinical and product development, you can speed up recruitment of your trials, execute the trials faster, retain patients on them. So there's a speed component, which is critical in that part of the process, and minimize the amendments that you go through with the FDA, and also prepare faster to market. You have the intelligence and the baked-in knowledge about the lived experience right up front. So I think that is something that is starting to change in the industry, and we support that, and we do a lot of that kind of work. And it is also speaks to that social contract too. I think individuals who work in the industry, once they get over the hurdle of the privacy issues in a company and find ways to deal with talking directly to patients, they find it incredibly inspiring, and it gives a lot of purpose to their work.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Noël, you and your team are doing some really fascinating work helping organizations bridge this gap between what the patients want and how companies communicate. So what's ahead for you and your team? What does the future hold?
We talked a little bit earlier about AI, and we know that about a third, I think the latest data is that about a third of adults in the US are using AI to find answers to their healthcare questions. So we are asking, what does that mean for how patients get to diagnosis, discover treatments, et cetera? I think I also saw a piece of data that said about 15% of US adults trust AI to provide a health diagnosis as much or more than a human professional. So we're working with a partner. We're going to be launching in January 2026, maybe February 2026. We're doing this quickly as we can. They have a tool for mapping the journey from those queries to how long it takes them to come across the information that they need to understand, to come across a treatment, to understand those treatment and how it impacts their journey. And so I'm interested in that and bringing that forward because it's already an opaque and complex process. So what we'd like to see is human AI leveraged in a human-centered way, not just to support efficiencies in insurance or prior authorizations or prescriptions, and not just to support the institutions, but to support the patients themselves.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So, Noël, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the time you spent as our guru today and providing the information that you have. If somebody wants to learn more about you and your team at Luminous, how do we do that? Is there a website? Are you on LinkedIn? How do our gurus find out more about what you're doing?
Sure. LinkedIn, of course. You'll find Luminous there, and our website, luminouseffect.com, EFFECT, all one word, luminouseffect.com. And we welcome comments and engagement and discussion. And thank you, Tom, for having me here and for the great questions you asked.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're most welcome. I enjoyed our conversation. So thanks so much for being our guru today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.